Hello there, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Liam Kilby. I am the Associate Director for the MBA Recruitment and Admissions team here at Oxford, coming to you from the school today. And I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour just walking through some application tips for those people in the audience that might be considering submitting an application in the next few months. We've got some deadlines coming up, or maybe you're at the beginning of your journey and are thinking about at that top level, is an MBA right for me? What kind of thing do I need to do to strengthen my application when the time comes? So we're just going to give a few moments to let everyone dial in and make sure the audience grows as much as we can. In the meantime, folks, today is very much designed to be more of a conversation. It's less, if you've been to some of my sessions before, it's less of a presentation to you. I do have a couple of slides, but it's really just around the application requirements. So I want people to feel comfortable and confident to send through some questions. And that's really how I want to do it. It's more of a Q&A session rather than just me talking at you for the first half an hour, 45 minutes. So with that in mind, there is the Q&A function here on Zoom. So if you have a question straight away, send it through. I'll start answering those questions as soon as I've given a quick overview of the couple of slides that we have. For most of the time, I'll have my camera off. I'll bring it back on if we have some questions that come through. But for now, let's get started. Thank you to everyone who's dialed in so far. The numbers are looking really healthy. Somebody's put a question into the Q&A already. Thank you. Straight in. Perfect. This is what I wanted, guys. Just send the questions through straight away. Don't wait. And we'll get started with some slides. So I'll be back with you in a few minutes with my camera on. But for now, let's make a start. And what I wanted to focus on, first of all, is really just, and I'll keep this window up for the majority of the next 10 to 15 minutes. This is really the application requirements that we have for the full-time MBA here at Oxford. If you've been to an open day here at the school, if you've been to one of our virtual information sessions, you'll have seen this slide before. And we always talk a little bit about how each of the things on this slide are equally important. There isn't really one thing that will make or break your application on its own. We view your application as a sum of its parts rather than focusing one or two individual areas that we think are very strong or might need some work or are competitive or might not be as competitive. So I think my message just to begin with is that everybody in the audience will probably at some stage be thinking, is this aspect of my application strong enough? And that could be a standardized test score. That could be, do I have enough work experience? That could be, have I chosen the right referees? And we can cover all of those things today. But my message back to you, if you are thinking that, is that there is no such thing as a perfect candidate, folks. There is no such thing as somebody who is strong in all of these areas. And so while you may have one or two areas that might not be as competitive as some of the other aspects of your submission, you will have real strengths elsewhere. And it's those strengths that we want to see, and it's those strengths that we want you to focus on. So look, please don't read into that it's okay to come in with a sub-R GMAT or GRE score because you think your work experience is particularly strong. We still want to see a strong as possible application from you in all of these areas. But I think what I'm trying to say is you don't have to be the best of the best in every one of these components to then get into the program. It's competitive. Of course it is. It's hard to get in. Of course it is. It's the University of Oxford. This is true. But sometimes people don't even know what their strengths are until they sit down and think, okay, well, it's not a standardized test score. So what is my strength? Oh, it's my references, or it's my professional experience, or it's the videos that I submit for the online assessment. So please don't worry too much if you feel as though one of these areas is lower than you would like it to be. It almost always will be to some extent. You'll have one area that you're not happy with, but that shouldn't hold you back from applying, is the message that I'm trying to get across. One question that's come through already, is it okay to ask personal questions? Do you mean personal about me or personal about your own preferences? What I would say in these kind of sessions, we'll try and answer the questions that we think will benefit the group the most. We only have so much time with you today. And so we'll try and focus on answers that are generic and applicable to more than one person in the audience. So if you're asking, can I ask personal questions about your set of circumstances? If it's a question that can still apply to others, then by all means ask it, and I'll get to it if I have the time. If it's a very specific question about you and, I have 3 years work experience, Liam, and I want to do this in my career, and my GMAT score is this, and it's all related to your own specific information, then that might not be a question that we would get to because it doesn't really help the group. Now, get in touch and ask that question on another forum, drop me an email, find me on LinkedIn, speak to one of my team members. We're happy to have that conversation. It just might not be the best forum in this instance, but ask your question and we can go from there. Hello, thank you for hosting us today. Are you able to share some examples of the recorded interview portion of the application process? I can't share them with you because you have to be a registered applicant in the system to get the link that gives you access to those. But I can give you an overview of what to expect. So this is the online assessment that we're talking about. This is hosted on the Kira Talent platform, and we have made some changes this year, folks. So if you've done some research, if you've been reading some forums, maybe if you're a re-applicant and you've been through this process already, it will be different for this year. So we will ask you 3 questions on the Kira Talent platform. They'll be in the form of pre-recorded videos that my team have done over the summer, and then we've uploaded onto the system. So when you get into the system, you'll have some time to practice. There'll be a few warm-up questions. These warm-up questions are not recorded. They are not seen by us. Please don't worry too much about that. But when you're ready for the formal assessment, you'll click start. You'll watch the first video. It's 10 seconds long, probably enough time for us to ask you a question. And then you'll be given about 20 seconds, 25 seconds to think of your answer. And then your webcam kicks in automatically and you are recorded. And you have about 90 seconds to complete your answer. And the areas that we'll ask you questions around are all leadership traits that we think are important and that we, in conversation with companies that are hiring MBAs from the school, are companies that are looking for these traits themselves. So it might be things like integrity. It might be things like drive or vision or communication or teamwork. And you'll have 3 different areas, 1 question for each area. And the question will be randomly assigned to you. And we have an online library of videos that we've recorded over the summer. You go into the system, you start the questions, you'll get one of several options. You don't get to pick, I'm afraid. You are assigned a question for each of those topics. 3 questions, 3 topics in total, and that's done. So you can do the whole thing in one sitting if you want to. You can record your answer to question 1, go and take a break, grab a drink, do something else for 25, 30 minutes, an hour the next day. You can take as long as you need between questions. But once you start a question, you have to finish it in one sitting. So question 1, you watch the video, 20 seconds to think about it, 90 seconds to answer, submit, question 1 is done. Question 2 doesn't start until you click start on question 2, and that's where you can take the break in between if you want to. The only other change that is different this year, so certainly for re-applicants, you'll notice this, the trigger for the Kira link to be sent to you will happen earlier in the process now. So as soon as you upload your resume onto the application system, and as soon as you enter the email addresses of the 2 referees you would like to use to write your references for you, those 2 things added together is the trigger to send the Kira link to you. And then within 24 hours, you'll receive the Kira link, which is your personalized URL to go onto the Kira Talent platform and then complete that online assessment. So it's a good idea to get that triggered fairly early. Upload your resume, put in your referees' email addresses, and then the next day you'll get your link. And that gives you plenty of time to practice. That gives you plenty of time to think about, okay, do I have some competency-based questions in my mind that I can use examples for? It's a good idea to prep. A lot of the questions you'll face are, can you share an example of a time that you've done this? Or tell me how you would respond if this were to happen to you. So it's behavioral, it's competency-based. is if you're going to a face-to-face professional interview, it's the kind of questions you would face there. So think a little bit about those questions you faced in your professional interviews over the years. Think about the examples you've given to those questions and have a few of those ready so that you can spend the 20 to 25 seconds of prep time really narrowing down which one you want to do. Now, the Kira Talent online assessment is an important part of your application. It is a mandatory part of your application. If you have not completed those videos by the time the deadline is upon us for the window in which you're applying, then your application will be considered incomplete and you will not be considered in that window. So it isn't something that's supplemental or optional. You really have to get that done in time along with everything else. So plan ahead, make sure you've triggered that link in plenty of time, and make sure you get that completed before you go ahead and submit the entire application. And hopefully that answers your question, but thank you for sending it through. What are some tips for a reapplicant? Good question. This happens fairly often. People don't always get in on the first attempt. We absolutely welcome people to try again. The only change you'll see in your application is there'll be an extra essay to write, which is asking what has changed since you last applied. So it might be that you've reset your GMAT score and you've got a higher score now. It may be that you've been promoted at work. Maybe you've taken a new job or you've pivoted your career. Maybe you've been working on some other area in your skill set or your knowledge base that maybe you identified as being a development area, and you've completed that. So we're looking for a little bit of change in your application and in your profile since you last applied. Now, for some people, that's not always a huge amount of time. So if you apply in one of the later stages in a January or a March of 1 year and you don't get in theory, you could reapply in September of the same calendar year. You're going into a different academic year, but it's the same calendar year. So maybe 6 to 9 months has passed since you last applied, and it's possible that not much has changed. If that's the situation that you find yourself in, I would recommend speaking to one of my team to try and understand what reservations did the admissions committee have about your application the first time around, to see if there's something that you could pointedly talk about in your essay. Now, the University of Oxford doesn't really give structured feedback on interview performance, but my team are happy to have an informal conversation with any candidate that is unsuccessful to really understand and get to the bottom of what maybe held him or her or them back. So get in touch and ask us, is there anything I should be focusing on, Liam? Was there any particular feedback from the interviewer that I need to work on? Did I not get to the interview stage? And if not, was there something missing from my application? And these are the areas that maybe that reapplicant essay should be focusing on, so that we can then alleviate any concerns that the admissions committee may have had the first time you came across their desk. Other than that, focus on the strengths that you have as before. It's really the same application as a brand new applicant, with just that reapplicant essay that you have to do that's different, I would say. If we retake the GRE or GMAT after submitting the application, can we send the updated score after the deadline? Yes, you can. I would be mindful of the time in terms of the window you have that it would make a difference. So, for example, we'll receive your application on or before the deadline of the window in which you're applying. We will process that. We'll make sure it's not missing anything, that it's complete. We'll then review that application to make a decision about whether we want to interview you or not. And that decision to interview you or not can be fairly quick. It can happen quite quickly. I mean, it's a lengthy process. We make sure we're making the right decision, but in terms of how long between reviewing and making the decision, it can be just a matter of days. So my point here is that you don't have a huge amount of time to get that new score to us if what you're trying to do is influencing the interview decision, because that can happen quite quickly. If we invite you to interview and you still want to try and improve your score, or you've already sat your test, but your new score isn't ready yet, then even after your interview, you can send us a new score, and that can then influence possibly the decision to admit, because there's a series of decisions that we go through at the admissions committee on your journey. We process your application, we review it, we make a decision whether to interview, we then have the interview, we make a decision then whether to admit or not. And so if you get that new GMAT or GRE score to us before those two decision points, then yes, it is worthwhile doing that if the score has improved quite dramatically. If you've already been invited to interview, I would say there's less urgency to get a new GMAT score to us, because if you've been invited to interview, we probably think you're good enough to be admitted. The interview is there really just to make sure and just to see your personality and understand how you might fit in with the cohort that we're trying to build each year. We probably have fewer concerns about any aspect of your application, GMAT or GRE included, if you've already gotten to the interview stage. So look, by all means, send us a new GMAT score any time of the year that you want to. If you're looking for a scholarship and you want to improve your chances of a scholarship, ones that go towards academic merit, then a new GMAT score, even after you've been admitted, can be helpful. So yeah, by all means you can. Just please bear in mind that a lot of those early decisions about whether to interview you are made on the GMAT score or the GRE score that you include in your application, because there just simply isn't time to get that new score to us in time before that decision is already made, if that makes sense. Okay, let's have a look at what we have. I'll be starting a master's degree in London this September. My IELTS score may be outside the 2-year validity period. Would I qualify for an academic waiver, or would you recommend retaking the test? You would qualify for a waiver based on your master's degree in London. I'm assuming that's a 1-year degree. That's an assumption I'm making. And therefore, I would assume that you would be applying maybe either this year while you're studying for your master's to join immediately after your master's degree, or you'd be applying the year after you graduate from that master's. Either way, that master's will be taught in English, I assume, in which case you will satisfy the academic requirement for an English language waiver, which is the completion of a degree level study taught in English within the last couple of years. And so you will not have to take the test again, provided you complete that master's degree that you're taking in September. Just going to pause on the questions for a second, folks, while I talk a little bit about GMAT or GRE. This might be one of the questions further down, but you've been very good at sending them through, and there's a few to get through, so I haven't seen it yet, but it might be there. Do we have a preference for GMAT or GRE? No, we absolutely don't. We still see the majority of people take the GMAT more than the GRE, although the GRE proportion is growing. Roughly speaking, I would say 1/3 of all applicants to the program at the moment take the GRE, 2/3 take the GMAT, and that they are meeting in the middle by maybe 1 or 2 percentage points each year. But it's still majority is the GMAT and the minority is the GRE. We don't mind which one you pick. And they are slightly different tests, as I'm sure you guys know. So I would recommend that you do a little bit of research, look at both of those tests and try and understand which one of those tests really suits your skills in the most effective way. The GMAT Focus obviously has been released in the last year. That's a little bit different. It's a lot shorter now. They've taken some of those sections out. They've integrated something else. So that might be now the GMAT Focus is the one to go for, whereas a year ago, maybe the GRE was the one to go for. So if you're still deciding which one to choose between, then please feel confident that we really don't mind which one it is. There may be a question later on about, oh, is there a minimum score that I need to trying to be achieving, Liam? And there really is no minimum. There really isn't. I would suggest that, I mean, this goes without saying, folks, but get as high a score as you can, of course. There's nothing ever wrong with a high GMAT or GRE score. But at the same time, I don't want people to think, oh, but if I look on the website, it talks about a competitive score and the average on the class that I can see from the demographics is around a 680. So if I don't have a 680 GMAT equivalent, should I not be applying? That isn't the case. The range of GMAT scores and the range of GREs starts from like a mid 500 GMAT equivalent all the way through to 800 on the GMAT. We have people that have full marks on the GMAT and everything in between. So I don't want people to worry that their GMAT might be, oh, it's a 595 on the Focus or a 605 on the Focus, and that's kind of the same as a 650 in the old language. So is that too low? No, please don't feel as though you can't apply because your GMAT in your mind is too low. Because as I said before, everybody will have some strengths elsewhere. And it's possible that your GMAT just is one of the areas that maybe isn't as strong as some of your other areas. And that's okay, because again, we look at your application as a whole and not just on how can we admit only people that will increase our average GMAT score each year. Some schools care deeply about their average GMAT score, and they wear it on their websites like a badge of honor, and that's entirely fine, and that's great if that's what they're looking to do. And they'll celebrate when their average GMAT score goes from a 730 to we're 733 this year. We've increased by 3 points, and that's a huge win for them. We want academic strength. Of course we do. We want people to be able to understand the concepts that are being taught in the classroom. We want people to be able to succeed academically. And GMAT score is one of those metrics that some people will pin a lot of emphasis on. Can you succeed academically? If you have a good GMAT score, the chances are you can. But fundamentally, the GMAT is just another standardized test. And there's an argument to be made that standardized tests are good at understanding how good you are at standardized tests. And there may well be a link between high GMAT scores and performance in classrooms. And there may well be a link between high GMAT scores and performance in a career. I've yet to see, in an infallible way, a link between a high GMAT score and a strong career. And so for that reason, yes, of course, we would like competitive scores. Of course we would. But at the same time, we care much more about what you'll bring to class and who you are as an individual and how you will integrate yourself with your colleagues and your classmates and your future friends and peers, and how you'll introduce ideas that maybe other people hadn't thought of, and how you will take part in debate and discussion around the classroom. And for us, that's more important than just what that black and white standardized test number can tell us about you. So, of course, get the best score you can, obviously, but at the same time, please don't stress or panic too much if you think that your score is below where it needs to be. I can guarantee you it probably won't be. So please don't spend too much time stressing about that. Is there a place to justify the choice of referees outside of the personal statement? No, there isn't really a place to justify it. And in the most polite and respectful way possible, I would question why you would need to justify it. We don't second guess why you've picked whoever you've picked. I'm sure you've put some thought into it. I'm sure you've got some rationale for it. If we were to ask you, well, why did you pick this person? I'm sure you can probably tell us, but we don't judge you for who you've picked, because we don't know who was available to you. We don't know who these people are. We obviously haven't met them before. So we don't know if, oh, actually, Liam, I would have picked that person rather than this person, because who are we to say that? So you shouldn't feel the need to justify your choices. If you really wanted to, the personal statement is the place to do it, because it's the only place you really can do it. But I think that might be a bit of a missed opportunity in terms of the personal statement, because it should be used for other things that add more value and are more compelling to your application. This is a great question. Thank you for sending this through. What aspects of the supporting statement have stood out to you in previous cycles? Yeah, this is a great question. Thank you. Some people think the supporting statement is best used for an explanation about something. Here's why my GMAT score isn't quite where I would like it to be. Here's why my undergrad GPA suffered in the first year, because I wasn't that focused. I was an 18-year-old undergrad and I was enjoying the social side of university too much. I mean, that's a mature thing to tell us. So you can use it for that if you want to. It doesn't really stand out as memorable because a lot of people use a supporting statement for those kind of explanation type essays. The best one I've had, and I did some content for the school on Instagram a few months ago, so if you've seen this, forgive me, I'm repeating myself, but we had an essay from a lady who applied in 2018 who grew up as a professional dancer, was a dancer from the age of 4 through to maybe 18, 19 years old before she went to university, and then she stopped dancing. And she was really able to, in her essay, talk a little bit about the discipline of dancing, managing workload, practice, managing her schoolwork at the same time, the skill set it enabled her to build, and how that would then link well in her chosen career in the future. So there were a couple of things that were really good about this. One is we love to hear about you as an individual. We love to hear about you as a person, because our jobs in the admissions team is to build this effective, engaging, diverse, in all sense of that word, interesting, fun cohort for you to be a member of. And in order to be able to do that effectively, we need to know who you are, because we need to know who we're adding to that mix of human beings. Who are you as a human being, and how will you fit with this other group of human beings that we're trying to build? So we love hearing about you. So this lady, we had no idea she was a dancer, so that was amazing to hear. She then obviously linked it really well to her future career and talked about how those skills that she'd learned were transferable to her future career. So on the one hand, it's something very personal about herself and her career as a dancer. On the other hand, this is how it fits with her post-MBA plans, which is a really compelling thing to do in your application. So that was almost a perfect example of an essay. I had another one a few years ago that was talking about a passion for AI and understanding the role it can play morally for good and potentially for bad. And the essay was about the penal system in the US and how the parole system in the US prison system was beginning to use AI to calculate the chance of reoffending, and would look at things like ethnicity, would look at things of like background, would look at things like the crime that person was incarcerated for in the first place, would look at things, if that information was held, about did they grow up in a one-parent family. And before we even got to the parole board, the actual board of people, this guy was talking about how the AI spat out a recommendation, and that it was beginning to be something that was so powerful that the parole board would listen to the recommendation more than maybe start to think for themselves. This was his opinion, folks. This was not gospel. But it was a really interesting use of the essay, because it allowed us to see where his passion lay. It allowed us to see why he was taking AI as a career super seriously. It allowed us to understand that he was kind of in that intersection between AI for good and AI possibly for questionable means, and how there's just a really thin line between those two things. So that was a really interesting concept as well. So I guess my biggest piece of advice for the personal statement is make it as personal as you are happy to share. Be authentic. Don't be afraid to be yourself. That really is a benefit to us. And to distill that down to the most extreme example, if we have one space in the class left to give, and it's between two people, it might not go to the person who has the highest GMAT score. It might not go to the person who has the most impressive career background. It will definitely go to the person that we think we know the best. Because going back to that thing of building this group of human beings, understanding what kind of personality is that final piece of the puzzle we're dropping into place is much more safe and secure than dropping in someone who's a bit more unknown, because it might be a jarring personality. They might be quite divisive. We don't know that because they haven't conveyed who they are that well in their application. And the supporting statement is the really the best chance you have to show us who you actually are and what is driving you, what motivates you, what are your passions, why are you doing an MBA in the first place. So I would think more of that kind of thing, and maybe less of the, here's why my GMAT score was only this number. Here's why my undergraduate GPA was only this number. Because I don't want people to feel as though they have to justify themselves. You guys are incredible. You'll all have real strengths in your application. Please use the personal statement to highlight your strengths and not justify your development areas. If we have any questions about your development areas, we'll ask you at the interview. If we have real questions about your development areas, you might not get an interview, but using the supporting statement to try and justify that isn't going to save you. It's a missed opportunity. Please focus on what makes you, you, and what makes you different from everybody else. Hopefully that answers the question. Let me just scroll through some of the other ones. Okay, Michael, good question. What would be the percentage of applicants that get invited to the interview, and who typically will conduct the interviews? I don't mind sharing these numbers with you. I would say something in the region of 50 to 55% of all applications will be invited to interview. So again, approximately 1 in 2. The interviews will be done by a member of the professional team at the school. It's not alumni, it's not current students. It could be me, it could be one of my team, it could be the MBA director herself, it could be a senior member of faculty. We have some associate fellows that are linked to the school that work very closely with the careers team that are experts in their sectors. It could be one of them, but it will not be a student or an alum. The interview will last 30 to 40 minutes. It's one-on-one, it's on a panel. Most of you, I would imagine, will have your interview done via Zoom. We can do some interviews in person in Oxford. We'll have some interview days where you can come and have your interview and then take part in a few different things that we put on for the day, like a taster lecture. We'll have lunch with some students and you can see the campus. We might also travel to you somewhere in the world. If you're based overseas, we often do travel overseas and do interviews in person in your city rather than ask you to come to Oxford. That isn't easy or fair for everyone to have to do that. But on the whole, it's a fairly short conversation because, as I mentioned before, we generally feel that if you're being invited to interview, then we think you're good enough. So about 1 in 2 people will be invited. And then because we think you're good enough, the vast majority of people at the interview stage are then accepted. And again, I don't mind sharing these numbers with you. I would say something in the region of 75 to 80% of people that I interviewed will then be extended an offer of admission. That's roughly over the last few years, that's kind of the mean that it's regressed to, about 75 to 80%, I would think. Okay, let's have a look. Would you recommend attending a one-to-one session before applying? Yeah, if you have time and you want to have the chance to talk about your profile specifically, it can be of value. There's a number of ways you can do this. I was in London this week on Wednesday and I met some candidates face-to-face over coffee. I spent the day there and spoke to 4 or 5 people. The team does that fairly regularly. If you look on our events page on the website, you'll see that we're in London every other week, 2 or 3 times a month sometimes. Sign up for a session, come down and meet us, and we'll have a good 45-minute chat about you and your specific circumstances. If you're in Oxford, you can fill in a form and ask for a campus visit. We can show you around, and as part of that conversation, we can have a one-to-one with you. If we're traveling in your region, we're almost always open to one-to-ones with you. So there's lots of ways you can do this. We can even just have a phone call sometimes. If you have particular questions about how to frame your strengths and how to talk about how you want to develop, if you have particular questions about, here's my post-MBA plan, Liam, do you think it's viable? Is it okay to talk about this? Then a one-to-one session can really help you understand how to position yourself when it comes time to applying. Having said that, we get a good number of applications each year, thousands of applications, and the vast majority of those people we've never met because there's just too many of you out there that are interested. And that's a nice problem for us to have. But the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to have a one-to-one to be successful. You don't have to introduce yourself to us to be successful. We'll see your strengths in your application, even if we haven't met you before. So please don't panic. Please don't feel as though you have to somehow find a way to meet us. That is absolutely not a requirement at all. It can be useful. It often is useful. We'd love to meet you, but you really shouldn't have to figure that in, like how to find a way to fit that into your schedule. If you can't do it, then that's not a problem. You can't do it. Are you able to touch on the differences between applying in round 1 versus round 2? Yeah, good question. In terms of time, and let me actually switch to this slide now. You'll see on here, in terms of time, there's not much difference at all. It's a month, and there's a month between each of our first 3 stages for the year. So September, October, November. The reason it's September the 2nd is just because that's a weekday. September the 1st is a weekend. That's the reason why it's not September the 1st. Otherwise, it would be. So in terms of when you introduce yourself to us, we'll see you a month later in stage 2 rather than stage 1. In terms of admission onto the program, I think that message that is often bandied around, apply early, I think is a good thing to aim for. Now, more important than applying early, I think, is applying at the time that you feel you can submit your strongest application. Each year you get 1 chance. You can reapply the following year, but you can't reapply in the same year. So you get 1 chance each year to apply and you want to make sure it's the best version of yourself that you can put forward. If that happens to be, I need a bit more time to refine my essay, I need a bit more time to maybe resit the GMAT and get a higher score, then maybe applying early, while that would be nice, doesn't work for you and you want to apply in November or January or maybe even March. That should be the main driver for when you apply. Now, having said that, there are some benefits to applying early. In stage one, the class is yet to be filled or even begun to be filled. No one has applied yet. No one's been admitted yet. Normally, stage one is a little quieter, and so you'll have less competition. You'll have fewer of your peers applying at the same time. Scholarships are given out from stage one onwards, and so there's more money to go around because no scholarships have been given yet. People will know, I think you get a member of one of the colleges at the University of Oxford as soon as you become a member of the MBA. And some of those colleges will take only a handful of MBAs, maybe 3 or 5 each year, while other colleges will take maybe 60 or 70. So if you're looking for a college experience in one of those colleges that takes only a few MBAs, being in stage one gets you to the head of the queue when colleges consider who they want to take, because you'll be one of the first names in the hat being drawn out because you were in stage one, you were admitted first, you were at the beginning of that list that colleges look at. So there are some real benefits to applying early, and I would encourage people to apply as early as they can that fits with when they think they can put their strongest application in. In terms of admission, how likely are you to get in? I would say as we go through the year, the class is beginning with each stage to get a little bit more full. There are maybe fewer spaces each stage to give. So it's natural to assume that each stage becomes slightly more competitive than the last one. That is probably accurate. I would say if you can avoid applying in March and you should be applying earlier, then that would be a good thing to do. And we still have spaces in March. Folks, we're not full by March. There's no point having a stage 5 if we never use it. So we'll still have stage 5. You'll still be able to apply if that's your own timeline that you're working towards. But please just bear in mind that the class is almost 85 to 90% full by that time of year because we've already had 4 of our 5 stages. And again, naturally, it's safe to assume that then that stage 5 becomes very competitive because we only have maybe 20 spaces left to give. And that can make it feel like it's harder to get in. And in all honesty, it probably is. You have to be the best of the best in those later stages to really get one of those spaces that are left. So I don't mean that we are more forgiving in stages 1 or 2, or that we lower our standards in stages 1 or 2. That's not what I'm saying at all. You still have to be the best of the best to get in at any one of these stages. But because we have more space to play with when we build that group of humans that I keep talking about in the early stages, we can maybe think, okay, well, this person, yeah, they look really good. Let's give them an interview. This person looks decent. Let's give them an interview. It's stage 1. We may as well see what they're like in person or on Zoom. So we probably are more forgiving with the interview decision in stage 1. And once you have the interview and you can show us who you are and your personality and how you perform in the interview, then that can swing it in your favor. We probably will interview fewer people in stage 5 because we know we have fewer spaces left to give. And therefore, it behooves us to make sure that we're not interviewing 500 people for 20 spaces. That doesn't make sense for us, and it doesn't make sense for the candidates. So apply early if you can, but please bear in mind that you get one chance and it needs to be your strongest application. So work towards that timeline more than anything that I'm telling you on this webinar today. What is the most important thing to show to get a Said scholarship if we don't qualify for any of the checkboxes on the funding page of the application? Yeah, good question. Let's talk about scholarships quickly. The best thing to show, it's hard to say because there's lots of different Said scholarships, and some of them will go on academic merit, like I mentioned before. For that, it's good GPAs, it's good GMAT scores. That is the best thing that you can possibly show. Other Said scholarships will go on region of nationality. We like to have a very international class, very diverse, regionally diverse class. And so we have some scholarships that are certain regions are eligible for to try and bring up what we believe are underrepresented regions in the student body. Other scholarships will go on gender. We have female-only scholarships. Other scholarships will go on your professional profile. What kind of job are you doing? Where are you working? we're trying to always think about getting the right balance of students into the class. And so some scholarships aren't really concerned with academic merit at all, because there's something else in your profile that just really jumps out at us from the page when we read about you. So if GMAT scores and undergraduate GPAs aren't already there, or you don't think that's going to be one of your strengths, then focus on something that makes you unique and makes you a real asset to the program. What can you bring? What skills can you share? What expertise and viewpoints can you share? How would you approach a problem that might be different? I saw another question when I was scrolling through here about voluntary work. We don't really factor voluntary work into a scholarship conversation. So don't feel as though you have to really focus on all that kind of giving back to the community. Look, it's great if you're doing that, and we absolutely want to hear about it. Of course we do. Because again, it shows us more of the human side of what you're doing, but it probably won't be a factor in the scholarship decision. One thing about scholarships, folks, while we're on the topic, it's important to understand that we want to try and help as many people as we can financially achieve their goals here at Oxford. And so we will try and spread our funds as far and wide as we can. But even with the money that we have, we can probably only give scholarships to maybe 1 in 3 people that are admitted. That's roughly speaking the percentage that get a scholarship, about 33% thereabouts. So in a class of 330, you're looking at maybe 110, 115 scholars. And those scholars will receive anything from maybe a 20 or 25,000 pound partial scholarship, all the way up to a full scholarship with some living stipend added on top of that, and then varying amounts in between. So this is going to sound a bit blunt and brutal and harsh, so forgive me, but I want everyone to aim for all the scholarships that they think they're eligible for. You should be applying for all of them. You should be hoping and aiming to get as many of them as you need to get here. But the reality is that only a minority of people are awarded a scholarship. And so for 2/3 of the people listening today, for 2/3 of the people that I meet on the road, for 2/3 of the people that are admitted, however you break that group down, 2/3 of you will probably not get a scholarship, I'm sorry to say. And so what's really important is to think about, what is my financial plan to be able to achieve my goals if I don't get a scholarship? Now, hopefully everyone that's listening today happens to be in the 1/3 that does get a scholarship, and these questions are answered for you. But it's a really sensible thing to think about, what is my backup plan financially? If I don't get a scholarship, how can I get there? And it's really important to start thinking about that now, and not start thinking about that when the scholarship news breaks. And if you haven't been successful, then you think, oh, dang, I really thought I was hoping to get a scholarship and now I haven't. I'm back to square one. Don't let yourself be back to square one if the scholarship news isn't a happy message. That's all I would say. Just a quick question, maybe a silly question. There's no such thing as a silly question. Don't apologize for that. Do we only get one chance to record our answer? I think you're talking about the Kira Talent online platform. Yes, you do. You do not get a chance to retake it. You can't pause it. You can't stop it. Once we're recording, you get 90 seconds, and you'll see a timer in the window. You'll know how much time you have left, but you don't get the chance to retake it. So use the practice questions, which are not recorded, to really get used to the idea of watching yourself on screen, seeing the timer ticking down, making sure that your mic is working and that the audio is set up correctly, because you get one chance. And unless you've had some real technical issues, like your internet crashed, the page froze, something happened where your laptop shut down. I had a power cut this morning at home. I'm at the school today to do the webinar for that reason. If that happens, then of course we can let you retake it. But if you just think, oh, I fumbled my answer a little bit, Liam, can I retake it? Then no, I'm afraid not. You get one chance. Okay, let's have a look here. What have we got? I remember hearing that before we had to complete that recorded portion in 24 hours. It's not the case anymore. Rather, the recorded portion is just due by the application deadline. Is that correct? Yes. So for people that have applied before or have researched applying before, you used to get the trigger point for the Kira video as soon as you submitted the application. Now, clearly, if you're submitting on September the 2nd, and then you have to wait 24 hours to even get the link, that takes you to September the 3rd, you've missed the deadline. So we've brought that trigger point earlier now so that we don't have that blind panic that we were seeing in the candidates every stage saying, I think I've submitted, but I haven't got my Kira link yet. Does that mean that I'm in or am I out? Am I next stage or am I this stage? And that was no fault of yours because the trigger system was set up in a way that wasn't the most convenient. That's why we've changed it. That's why we've brought it earlier in the process. You'll still have to wait 24 hours to get your link to start the Kira Talent questions, but the link is sent to you earlier in the process. The only way that you'll get your link now on the deadline is if you only upload your CV or your resume and your reference details on the day of the deadline, because that is now the trigger. And if you're uploading your CV on the day of the deadline, I would question how much planning you've put into putting your application in on time anyway. So the system has changed. You'll get it much earlier. Please make sure that it's complete before the application deadline has passed. And just for the record, guys, the application deadline is midnight or 23:59 in the 24-hour clock on the day of the stage deadline you can see on the screen here. Hi, Liam. I have a quick question about recommendations. My former supervisor, who was an executive director in investment banking when we worked together, has since moved on to a corporate role as a C-level exec. On the recommendations page, should I list his organization and position as they were when we worked together, or should I use his current role? Please use his current role. His letter of reference will talk solely about the time you worked together. And it might be useful for him in his reference to say, I know this person from my time working as this position in this company. It doesn't matter that it's no longer his position or his company. That's okay. But it would be good to have an understanding of where he is now. His professional email address that you provide probably will have some kind of suffix that links to his current company anyway. So if you're telling us about his previous employment and he's got a different email address, that might raise some questions. So go with his current details, and that's probably the best thing to use. Is there guidance available on what counts as professional experience? For example, does freelance work or self-employment count? Yes, it definitely does. Loosely, the definition of work experience, as far as we're concerned, is something that is full-time and something that is paid. It doesn't have to be continuous professional service for a year before it counts. It can be pre-undergrad. Some people do things a little bit differently. Don't go to university as an 18, 19-year-old. They go into the workplace, work for a few years, then go back to college and complete their degree. So that counts. It can be summer internships if they're full-time and they're paid, and you can kind of patch together a few summers to make the required 2 years minimum. That really is the only definition that we're looking for, something that is full-time and something that was either salaried or something that you were paid a compensation for. And that will then, all of that counts. Could you kindly advise whether the recommender would still be able to submit their references if we have already submitted our own part of the application? Or should the letter of reference be ready before the whole application is submitted? So it's two slightly different questions. So practically and physically, yes, they can submit after you've submitted. That is possible. The system will allow that. We don't offer that much of a grace period on these deadlines. So if you submit by September the 2nd, but your letter of reference or one of your referees doesn't submit their reference until maybe September the 5th, you'll have missed that deadline. Despite you submitting on time, it's not a complete application because your referee hasn't got in on time. So while they can submit their reference after you've submitted your application, that still needs to happen all before that midnight time on the day of the deadline. So you should be having conversations with your referees from a fairly early stage and give them plenty of time to get their questions out to you, and you can relay them to us if you need to. Give them plenty of time to get their written work done and submitted so that you aren't panicking or stressing unnecessarily when it comes to the deadline, to make sure that they have done their part and you have done your part. I would hate for you to miss out on a deadline because your referee hasn't quite gotten around to writing their reference. And these people are busy. I understand that. So the earlier you put their email addresses into your application, the earlier the system will then kickstart that process. Just for reference, overnight, automatically, as soon as you enter their email addresses, the system will send the reference request to that email address overnight the next day, so they'll have it straight away. So as soon as you know who your referees are and you've got that confirmed and you've spoken to them, put their email addresses into the system. This could be like 10 days, 2 weeks, a month before the deadline. If you want it to be, you can put them in anytime you want to, but it just gives them more time to complete their part before their deadline passes, because it has to be in before the deadline has passed. Otherwise, we'll push you to the next stage. Are there requirements for applicants to have a 4-year degree similar to US MBA programs, or are applicants with a 3-year degree eligible? Yes, 100%. Anything that is an undergraduate degree, regardless of the length of that degree, then yes, you are eligible to apply. A lot of European universities will do 3-year degrees. A lot of US universities will do 4-year degrees. We have a global applicant base. We have to be able to cater for everybody. It's not your fault if you've chosen an undergraduate course that was only 3 years. It's completely fine for you to apply with a 3-year degree versus a 4-year degree. We do not have that requirement at all. If my undergraduate course was completely taught in English and exams were also in English, but not in an English-speaking country, will it be considered as a waiver? Again, there's 2 parts to this question. Yes, you don't have to be in an English-speaking country as long as your degree was taught in English. But there is a time limit to that academic waiver. That degree level course must have been completed within 2 years of you applying. And if it's been longer than that, even if you were taught in English, even if your exams were in English, it's been too long. That period has expired. And so you probably will need either to find a professional waiver. Do you use English in your day-to-day work? You could do that instead. Or you will have to do an English proficiency test, because if it's not within 2 years of completing that degree taught in English, I'm afraid you cannot use it. What is a competitive or average score to get a scholarship based on academic merit? I assume you mean GMAT or GRE. Good question. Please don't hold me to this, because this is a number that will change based on who applies, right? So the average GMAT score of applicants will change year on year. But for the past couple of years, and actually before I talk about this, it's probably worth talking about regional differences in GMAT as well. You know, some parts of the world have grown up with standardized tests. If you're a US citizen and you've been through the US educational system, you'll have standardized tests at several points throughout your academic career. Your SATs, standardized tests. The LSATs, if you've taken that, standardized test. In the UK, we have some standardized tests as well. Other parts of East Asia, very comfortable with standardized tests because they're used to them. They do them all the time. Unsurprisingly, you'll see quite strong scores coming out of those areas because they've done standardized tests before in their academic career. Access to prep materials is good. Access to test centers is good. They're able to find maybe a tutor online or in person that can help them. That service exists quite commonly in those areas. And so those scores are good. So it would be unfair of us to hold every candidate we have to the same standard of GMAT score, because there are parts of the world where access to test centers is not good, where access to test prep materials is not good, where candidates have never done standardized tests before because they're not part of their academic career or educational system. So why am I saying that? Because a competitive score or average score to get an academic merit scholarship has an extra layer to it, which is what region of the world are you coming from, and how do you compare against the peers that you have in your application window that are coming from the same region. You know, if we have somebody from India, for example, with a 770, and we have somebody from maybe somewhere in Latin America with a 620, is it fair to say the 620 isn't good enough because compared to a 770, it's clearly lower? When actually, if you look at the data that GMAT provides on test taker scores, a 620 from Latin America is very competitive. A 770 from India is also very competitive. But a 710 from India might not be as competitive as a 710 from somewhere else in the world. And so we have to almost layer this decision with a comparison against regional norms and your peers that you're applying against. So with that in mind, to answer your question, I would say historically, anything around a 680 equivalent, and that's about a 625, 635 on the Focus edition, that will give you a very good fighting chance to be considered for the academic merit scholarships. Now, There are some people that will apply, as I mentioned before, with full marks, with a 795, with an 800. It doesn't automatically mean that they will just hoover up all of those academic merit scholarships because their undergrad might not be as strong. So it's a combination of things. So it's difficult to answer that question, but I think it's important to talk about regional differences and how we won't be holding everyone to the same standard because that is hugely unfair. Is there a GPA cutoff? No, there's not. Honestly, I would say we convert your GPA into a UK style scoring system. So I think a 3.7 US style GPA is a first class degree. A 3.5 is what we call an upper second class, a 2-1. I've seen people admitted with a third class degree. I've seen people admitted with less than a third class degree, UK equivalent. And it's one of those things, as I mentioned before, folks, where one thing on its own will not make or break your application. So there is no minimum cutoff requirement for the GPA. Look, it might be that you want to talk to us about why it is as low as it is. Maybe you have a valid reason. We get lots of people each year that talk about a family bereavement or a family illness. Maybe they went through an illness themselves. Maybe they had some difficulty settling in away from home. Like there were lots of reasons why people underperform at college, and we don't feel as though that should hold you back for the rest of your life. So tell us about the reasons, the conditions that you were in, the circumstances that you were in at that time. We still want to hear from you, even if you think your GPA is too low to apply. There is no such thing as too low to apply on its own. You'll have strengths elsewhere. That's the message that I want to leave you with today. You will have strengths elsewhere. Everybody does. We've got a couple of minutes left, guys. I want to try and get through 2 or 3 quick ones. For scholarship considerations, by which round should we apply? We have 2 pots of money, folks. One is internal that we control ourselves. That is given out from stage 1. So to be in consideration for that, apply as early as you can, because as the year progresses, that money will start to dwindle. We have other scholarships that have a deadline by which you have to be admitted onto the program already to be considered. And for all of those scholarships, that deadline is you need to be applying in January or earlier. So don't wait until March if you are going to go for a scholarship that has a deadline of admission by January. And by January, I mean, you can apply in January. You'll hear about your admission maybe in February. But because you've been in that January pot, you are included in the scholarship conversations. As long as your application is submitted by January the 6th, that is the deadline to apply for all of the scholarships that do have their own deadlines. Can you apply with your provisional GMAT score as you wait for the official results to arrive? Yes, you can. I would say we need more than just a Word document where you've typed out something like, oh, hi, admissions committee, my provisional score is a 685. Like we need some evidence of your provisional score. Because if you can't provide that, then you'll get pushed to the next deadline. If you can't get your official score report to us in time, that's okay. We'll need it probably before we make an admissions decision, but that comes later on in the window. But we'll need at least some evidence of your provisional score before we can accept your application. So yes, you can, but make sure it's as formal as can be for a provisional score, if that makes sense. Is there an option to select 2 countries if you are a dual citizen? Yes, and we would like to know about that. If you have dual citizenship, tell us both. It's always interesting to see how you can add to the regional diversity just within one person. That's always good to have. If I have a master's degree, will the GPA/class of degree be considered instead of undergraduate degree? Not instead of, but on top of, definitely. So if you've maybe underperformed in undergrad, but you've gone on to do really well in your master's, we will make note of that, and that can help your cause. So it won't replace the undergrad GPA, it won't replace the undergrad consideration, but it will be supplemented with that master's result. Are we able to view our recorded Kira answers retrospectively to check if the audio worked? No. I would use the practice sessions to make sure your audio is working. If we come to watch your responses and the audio has not worked, we will tell you and we'll let you reset it again. So don't worry too much about that. We will not let that happen or slide without letting you know. Okay, one more question, guys, and then I'm going to have to cut you off. And I'm sorry, I've had, according to the Q&A box, 84 questions, and there's no way I've been able to get to all of them. So forgive me for not being able to get to yours if I haven't read yours out, but thank you very much for your engagement and sending all of these through. What is the best one to ask for here? Let's go with, this is just a very quick one. At what stage is the deadline for Skoll and Weidenfeld-Hoffmann? January. January is the deadline for every one of those named scholarships that you might find on the website. Always aim for January or earlier. Okay, this is a good question. This might make us overrun, but I'm not that sorry because this is a great question. If you need to go back to work, guys, if you need to get on with your day, don't feel as though you have to stick around for this. This could get a few minutes long. The question is from Jordan. Thank you, Jordan. Hi, Liam. You've mentioned the importance of personality a few times. Can you share what qualities and characteristics you are looking for in candidates when reviewing applications? This is a great question, Jordan. Thank you. We, the school, want people who are, this is going to sound quite trite, folks, forgive me, people who are good people. We don't want people who are just going to agree to everyone else. We want people who will respectfully disagree. That's what Oxford is built on, debate and discourse and conversations. We want people who have the right balance. A lot of aspects of your application to Oxford will be about balance. And one of those aspects is we want people that are confident in their skills and confident in their strengths and can talk well about their strengths in their application. Back to one of the first things that I said, and we'll keep saying, everyone has some strengths. Talk about them as well as you can. At the same time, we don't want people that think that all they have is strengths, because not everyone is perfect. I mean, in fact, no one is perfect, forgive them. Everyone has something that can be developed or heightened or honed in a slightly way. Maybe the edges can be smoothed a little bit. However you want to phrase it, we all have ways in which we can develop. Recognizing those development areas and being confident enough to talk about your strengths, but also humble enough to talk about how you still can learn and what you can bring to the class in your expertise, but what you can take from the class, from their expertise, is a really nice balance of humility, but also confidence. We want people that are able to really talk about their strengths in a very positive and compelling way, but aren't so big-headed that they don't recognize that they can develop at the same time. We want people who recognize Oxford as an opportunity. And please don't think that what I mean by this is that you should feel grateful to be here. That's not what I'm saying at all. If you're admitted, you shouldn't feel gratitude. You should feel proud, certainly. But you've worked hard to be there. You've worked hard to get into the program. You've worked hard in your career. You've worked hard at your GMAT score. You've put effort into your essays. You deserve your place. If you're admitted, folks, I can tell you now, you deserve to be here. So don't feel grateful. That's not what I'm talking about. But please recognize that being here is a privilege. And it's an opportunity that not everyone gets. And you might only get once in your entire life. This might be the year that you are at Oxford and you don't come back or do another degree. Maybe this is your one chance to do so. So I want people that can demonstrate the ability to grasp that opportunity with both hands. And that doesn't mean anything about giving back to the school. That doesn't mean anything about being the best performer in class. That doesn't mean about ignoring class entirely and just going to socialize in the college network. Guys, please don't do that. Please come to class. What I'm talking about is just understanding that you have access to an opportunity that thousands of people would kill to be in. And that you take from that opportunity the things that you need to go on and do the amazing things that you are destined to do. So don't be grateful. Don't say thank you to me and my team because you've helped you in the way. I mean, say thank you if you want to. We don't expect it. But I don't want you to thank me by coming and saying, Liam, I wouldn't be here without you. That in itself is nonsense, guys. We might answer some questions for you. We might review your applications. We might help you along the way, but you're here because you deserve to be here. But recognize what that means. You are an ambassador for the University of Oxford. You are an ambassador for the Saïd Business School. And what that means is a level of responsibility to take that opportunity seriously. I want people that will become a good member of the cohort, that will see one of their classmates struggling and take them under their wing and help them succeed. Like that rising tide lifts all boats. That mantra is very important. We do a lot of things at the school that are group-based, team-based study groups, working with colleagues and partners in small groups and small teams. I want to see people that are contributing to their team for overall success of the group rather than individual success trumping everything else. This is by no means a negative thing to talk about in terms of other programs, but when I started in this job 8 years ago, I was dealing with a lot of candidates from North America, and they would tell me anecdotally, I was new to the market. I didn't really understand what the American MBA was like. And so I learned from them through their stories that sometimes other MBA programs can be quite cutthroat and can be quite, every man and woman for themselves. It's dog eat dog. And our MBA is not like that. You will see the class working together. You will see people help their peers. And let me give you a tangible example. After your lecture in accounting has finished for the day, there might be people in the room that have never done accounting before. And so the accountants in the room that have maybe a CPA, maybe a CFA, they've done some financial aspects before, they will stay behind and say, guys, if you want to run through those concepts, if you want to go over that again, just in a peer-led discussion, let's stay behind and do it together. And that's what I'm talking about when I say I want good people in the class. And it does sound a little bit trite and cliche, but I want you to apply to the school if you feel as though you want to be the member of something that is great as a group. If you want to be individually great, look, you're still welcome to come, but you'll get further as part of a team, and you'll get further as part of find your tribe and that kind of thing. So I can talk about this for a long time. I'm going to have to cut myself off because I've gone 7 minutes over. So Jordan, thank you for the question. It's a really good question. I'd elaborate further if I had more time, but I don't want to keep you guys for too long. So let me turn my camera back on so I can just say goodbye face to face, because otherwise that's rude. Thank you very much for joining me for the last hour and 8 minutes now. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to all of your questions, but I hope I got to some of them. As I mentioned before, find me on LinkedIn, find my team on LinkedIn, email us, go to the website, get our email address, get in touch, come and see us in person at the school if you want to. We'll come and see you in London if you're in town. We'll come and see you overseas if we're traveling. We'd love to get to know you. We'd love to meet you, and we can have much more in-depth conversations about your individual circumstances and personalities. If you're applying in the next few weeks, best of luck. If you have any other questions, please get in touch and let us know. We'd be happy to have these conversations with every one of you that's come today. Thank you so much for coming along and engaging with me, and hopefully we'll see your application come across in the next few weeks. Bye for now, guys. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great time, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.